Hello, everybody. My name is Chip Brewster. Welcome into an episode of We Witnessed. This is a program put on by Nexstar Media, where we take a look back at some of the many archives from across our company. How many archives, you might be asking? Well, I've got a handy map for you. So this is a map of all of our current stations in Nexstar Media, and every single one of those dots represents a city, represents hundreds, thousands, really tens of thousands. Maybe we're getting to millions of stories because some of these stations have been around for a while. And what's really neat about a number of those stories is they start at a local level, but they become national, perhaps international. Today's We Witness story is one of those, and it's going to come to us from, let me nail this, there it is, Indianapolis, Indiana. So this is one where the events took place in 1977. But I admit to you, as amazing as this footage is, I had not heard of it nor seen it until I just sort of stumbled across it when our local station was covering this. So when I say the name Tony Kiritsis, some of you out there might go, I know what this is about. And others, you're going to be like me, and you're going to go, never heard of it. You will never forget it, though, after this episode. And we begin with some of that amazing footage. This is a story from our station there, WXIN, when a movie came out about true life events. This happened in the movie coming out in 2025. But again, that footage from 1977. Take a look.
It's been nearly 50 years since Tony Kiritsis took Richard Hall hostage, and nobody who ever watched it will ever forget it. And anybody who sees the movie next week will never believe it.
So what's your plan, Tony, huh? What's next? This is a dead man's wire.
That's what it looks like in the movie.
I don't like
This is what it looked like through Jack Parker's TV camera.
I couldn't believe I was seeing what I was seeing. I looked at that and I thought, man, this looks like a episode right out of Kojak. I couldn't believe it.
Parker followed Hall and Kiritsis down Washington Street until the pair slipped on a patch of ice and nearly went down.
That's where the gun should have gone off, I think. It came that close to that hair trigger of taking Dick Hall's head off.
Kiritsis forced Hall into an IPD car and escaped westbound to the Crestwood Village apartments. On the west side of town, not far from where Kiritsis thought he had a real estate development deal with Hall's mortgage company.
He believed that he was not getting a fair shake from Memo Hall.
You can't just take an innocent man and wire a shotgun around his neck and parade him around just because you felt like you did something, or they did something wrong against you.
For 63 hours in the February cold, the media and police staked out the apartment where Hall was held hostage. As WIBC's Fred Heckman, virtually the only person Kiritsis trusted, negotiated for the businessman's life. As all of Indianapolis listened and watched the drama play out live.
I think you can definitely make the argument he took the whole city hostage.
Finally, Kiritsis agreed to end the crisis in a profanity-laced live press conference.
I went on national television. I've been called a kidnapper, an extortionist, a thug, and everything else.
Watch your head, Tony.
In the end, Kiritsis surrendered. Dick Hall was set free. His captor went to court.
Find the defendant, Anthony G. Kiritsis, not guilty.
And was found innocent by reason of insanity and was released from a mental hospital in 1988.
Half the people think he's nuts, the other half think he's a folk hero. He's crazy on top of crazy.
Alan Berry and Mark Enox produced Dead Man's Line, a documentary in 2017, and we'll provide a link to their work on our website. Dead Man's Wire goes into limited release tomorrow and can be seen nationwide a week later. In the studio, Russ McQuaid, Fox 59 News.
And you saw it in there, just a few moments of some of the video that we will be showing you on this episode of We Witness. You also heard some of those details. Taken hostage by shotgun with a wire tied around his neck. One little piece missed out. The wire actually tied to the trigger, which was what made it a dead man's wire, where if something were to have happened to Tony Kiritsis, then that shotgun may have gone off and taken out Dick Hall right along with Tony. So to talk about this, we actually saw him briefly in that video. We're going to see him again, is the man who captured so much of this footage, Mr. Jack Parker, and he is joining us now to reflect once again. Jack, I mean, I have to first, I don't know how old you are. I'm going to guess 65. So you had to have been a young man when this happened 50 years ago. Was this early on in your career? How many other major events had you covered?
Nothing like this. Other, the usual car accidents, that sort of thing. But no, I was 7 years into my career with the Independent, at that time, WTTV, and very small staff. And I was basically one of two photographers available to go out the door. Didn't take me more than a couple seconds to say, let's go. And I said that to our newsroom secretary because I wasn't sure, I didn't have a reporter in yet. I just happened to be in early, and she went with me and wound up being secretary reporter that day.
What was the call that came over that made you guys say, there's a news story happening, we need to cover it?
Over the police scanner said a man with a gun and gave the address. And a few seconds later, as I'm going out the door, they said a man with the gun with a police officer. So I like, holy mackerel, what's going on here? So Jeannie Raymond, my reporter, I'll give her credit for that. She stuck with me all the way. And so we raced uptown from the south side. Everybody else, their stations were on the north side. We came in from the south side from our studio. And that gave me the advantage that day because everybody had followed Tony coming out the door of the building, and the police and the media followed him about a block and a half to where I picked up the story. And so that gave me a real advantage. When I got there, Washington Street is the main east-west street through Indianapolis, and basically a block off of the Monument Circle, which is ground zero for Indianapolis, for all the addresses and everything. So I started rolling from this side of the street, and then I finally, after about a minute or two, I moved out to the edge of the curb and used the light pole to steady me up. I was shooting off the shoulder, and they were in the shadow. It was in February 8th, 1977. So the sun had not seen the north side of the street yet. I was in the sunlight, they were in the shadow, and as a TV news photographer with the film camera, first thing you did is take your light reading and you changed your iris and you went from there. I had 7 years of experience. I just had to guess it at about 5.6 in the shade. Fortunately, it was right on.
Wow. And thank you for the technical details. Anyone out there that knows this stuff, that might have just geeked out with you just a little bit. I want to get back to some of the images you captured, though. So your information going out the door, we've been seeing that first story replay here on the screen, was just man with gun and then police involved. So when you arrived on scene, when did you notice that the shotgun was actually attached to the hostage, who we now know to be Richard Hall? He prefers Dick Hall.
I noticed the proximity of the gun to the back of his head. I didn't know that that was wired at the time. After about a 5-minute pause there, they started down the street because Tony decided he was going to take Dick Hall back to his apartment on the west side. And as they did that, there began an entourage of police cars on their side of the street, right at the curb. So they were only about 5 or 6 feet away from them. I moved to the center of the street, and within 2 blocks where you saw the shot where they turned around and almost slipped on the ice, by that time I was shooting over the police car to them. So basically I was only about 10 to 12 feet away from him and the gun. And only at one time, as we were walking, a plainclothes police officer just motioned me to get back, stay behind the muzzle. And when he said that, that was really the first time I thought, yeah, that gun could go off and could come my way. Never gave it a second thought. So, you get your adrenaline's going and you're just capturing it. And like I said, it was unbelievable to see something like that wasn't on TV as a series.
Right. Yeah. No, that it was a nonfiction event happening in real time, in real life. And like you mentioned, feet away from yourself. I want to hit some of the details surrounding this event now to give a little bit more context for anybody watching it. So we mentioned this happened February 8th, 1977. The lead up, though, Tony Kiritsis had taken out a $110,000 mortgage from Meridian Mortgage, which is where Dick Hall worked. Dick was his mortgage broker, to obtain a 17-acre piece of land for commercial development. He was thinking it would become a shopping center. However, he was having difficulty getting investors, securing development, and started to think that it was Dick Hall and his father who were sabotaging these deals because they wanted the land for themselves as valuation had increased. So that's what was happening in Tony's mind. He fell behind on his payments, and then Dick Hall, as the broker, said, I'm not going to give you more time to make those payments. And that's what ultimately led to the actions he took, where he went into that office with the shotgun and wired it to Dick Hall, and then began a, 63-hour hostage crisis with the shotgun wired that entire time. So when you caught up with them, it was a pretty new event. He had just left the mortgage broker office, correct?
Correct.
And so from there, they got into the police vehicle, and then they went to his apartment. Is that right?
Yeah. Now, we had no idea where he was going. The rest of the media was about a half block back. And by the time we got to the police car, it was becoming a little more routine. It was still a moving thing, except for there at Illinois and Washington Street, where he flipped him around like a dog on the end of a leash. That's where they should have they both went down to keep from the gun going off or slipping, because they slipped on some
we saw that in that first clip.
Yeah. And they had an interchange with police officers. And again, I was basically shooting over a police car, and there were a couple of officers in front of me. One of the younger guys was trying to pull his gun out because he got caught up, and it's like, hey, we just can't let this guy keep going.
Yeah.
And his sergeant, because I could see the stripes, he goes, no, leave it there. Don't pull it out. And so that was pretty close to an exchange between Tony and him. Tony was yelling at them, and he even said, I like police officers. I got lots of friends. So he felt a camaraderie with them, thinking, say, oh, that's okay, Tony, take the guy. But he didn't. So they went another 2 blocks, got down to Senate Street, right in front of the State House. That's where he saw the police car, because the officer had blocked the intersection to stop all traffic from coming through. But he left his door open with the car running. And he was probably about 30 feet away. And Tony looked at that and said, hey, there's a nice warm car. Most people forgot that it was only 9 degrees above zero, and both of them were in their shirt sleeves.
Yeah.
So, but under those circumstances, the weather didn't really bother them. Now, one caveat to this that the prosecutor liked, because they talked to me before they went to trial, and had requested all the video that I had shot. Not video, but the film that I'd shot. The guy said, this is a perfect case. He says, the stuff that you shot when they were first stopped in front of Price Brothers, he says, and then you shot down the street. Well, being a TV photographer, you shoot the action, you shoot the reaction. In the reaction, that was a landmark, because Ellis Ayers had been there forever as a department store. On the corner was the famous cherub on the clock, so it gave the time. The cherub was a local landmark, and then within the shot there was also a bank that had an electronic, so it gave the time and temperature. So they had it all at that point, and then just a few people looking. And I go, okay, I never really thought about that being great evidence, but there you go.
Yeah. So your video played a separate role even in the legal process.
Yes.
I want to, speaking of your video, take another moment to play back some video that we have. And up to this point, we've spoken about Dick Hall. He did pass around 2024, so we don't have him to interview yet again. But of course, since that time, he had been interviewed, including in this package that once again comes from our station in Indianapolis.
He said, I'm gonna wire this shotgun to your neck. The word I kind of think of is he wanted a platform. And he wanted press coverage, I think.
Former Channel 4 photographer Jack Parker was at the corner of Meridian and Washington Streets on the morning of February 8th, 1977, when he got the shot of Tony Kiritsis leading Dick Hall down the street with a shotgun wired to the back of his head.
I could see two guys on the other side of Washington Street. Tony takes Dick and he whips him around 180 degrees, looking back the other way like a dog on the end of a leash. And then they slipped on some ice and they both went down, fortunately. And if the gun was going to go off, it should have gone off then.
Hall and Kiritsis stumbled onto a running police car with the driver's side door open near the State House, and they drove away to the gunman's West Side apartment, where the hostage standoff would last for a total of 63 hours.
You usually living just second by second. Yeah, I really wasn't thinking too much about the future at that point. He spent a lot of time trying to tell people how they couldn't mess with him, because of that dead man's line. He couldn't. He was a little fearful of his own safety. Well, I certainly was trying to figure out a way to get out of the whole situation, and I was also. I guess I was of a mind that I didn't want him to get feel completely in control of me.
Finally, on the night of the third day, Kiritsis held a live televised news conference with a gun to his hostage's head, surrounded by police and reporters.
I've been called a kidnapper, an extortionist, a thug.
At that point, I thought, if he gets too close, Tony may get nervous and go ahead and shoot me.
Kiritsis captured everyone's attention, wrung a public apology out of Hall, thought he had an immunity deal, and let his hostage go. Kiritsis was found not guilty by reason of insanity, hospitalized for 10 years, and set free to resume his angry public tirades until his death in 2005.
I think my greatest my greatest thought was that I don't have to listen to him. That his mouth has been silenced.
And there we have it, seeing more of that astounding, honestly hard to believe video that Jack captured. Jack, I want to talk about the press conference, but we do need to take a quick break. So we're going to take that break, come back. I have another video we will hear from one of the police officers in attendance, and then you're going to kind of break it down from the witness side of all of that and how this story concludes. Stick around, everybody. We'll be right back. And we are back. Welcome back. Chip Brewster here, Jack Parker joining me. We are talking about the event from 1977 where Tony Kiritsis took Dick Hall hostage by attaching a shotgun to the back of his head with a wire tied to the trigger of that shotgun. Jack, I want to talk more about the press conference, but before you and I continue our conversation, I'm going to bring in the next piece of archival footage that we have, which is an interview with one of the police officers. He was the lead detective on the case. He's the guy that put the handcuffs on Tony Kiritsis once all of this wrapped up. So watch this more amazing video, and then Jack and I will be right back.
It was on a cold winter's morning, February 8th, 1977, when Tony Kiritsis walked into a mortgage broker's office here at 129 East Market Street, wired a shotgun to Richard Hall's neck, and went out for a walk.
I don't like to call that.
Kiritsis was mad because Hall's company held a mortgage on a piece of property he wanted to develop on the west side, and the deal was falling through, and the mortgage company was calling Kiritsis' note due. What followed was a 63-hour-long ordeal as Kiritsis held Hall captive at gunpoint inside, he said, his explosives-rigged apartment on the west side. Kiritsis negotiated through WIBC News Director Fred Heckman with IPD Chief Eugene Gallagher for, he thought, a grant of immunity and a $5 million promissory note. Finally, Kiritsis emerged into a live press conference on the property, his shotgun still wired to Hall's neck, and live on TV aired his grievances for an hour.
I went on national television. I've been called a kidnapper, an extortionist, a thug, and everything else.
In that room, literally watching over Tony's shoulder, was IPD Homicide Lieutenant Mike Popchev.
I was focused on him, just totally focused on him.
Well, there's that picture of you. There's Tony in the foreground with Hall.
Right.
Then right behind him is Fred, and then right over Fred's shoulder is you looking over Fred's shoulder. And at that time, you're thinking to yourself,
I'm going to shoot him. If I can shoot him, I'm going to shoot him right there. At one point, Chief Gallagher took me and Joe St. John to the side. He said, he's not leaving this model home. He said, when we get to the door, and I don't remember who's going to pull the shotgun sideways or who's going to pull his head, and the chief said, I'm going to put one in the back of his head. He's not going back to that apartment.
As recounted in the documentary Dead Man's Line, Kiritsis finally agreed to call it off and retreated with officers to a nearby empty apartment to surrender and remove the dead man's wire from around Hall's neck.
He threw the shotgun on a couch, and then, fast forward, we're standing there. Gallagher's about this close to his face talking to him, and I'm on here, and I think I have my hand up here somewhere. I'm not sure. But Kiritsis says, he's ready to go. I'm ready to leave. Gene says, no, you're under arrest, Tony.
And that's Mike Popchev in the white trench coat after he put the handcuffs on Kiritsis' wrists, escorting him to a detective's car for the ride downtown.
He's still mad. Before we got halfway downtown, he started laughing about something. And I went, oh, brother.
Years later, after Kiritsis was released from a psychiatric hospital, Mike Popchev saw him again at a West Side convenience store.
I stepped out of my car and said, hey, Tony, how you doing? Just like that. USB, get away from me. You and that Gallagher was going to kill me. He was yelling this. I yelled back at him, Tony, you're still nuts.
Tony Kiritsis was found not guilty due to reason of insanity. Mike Popchev thinks maybe if he'd gone to court instead of wiring a shotgun to Richard Hall's neck, he may have prevailed in a lawsuit. The movie, Dead Man's Wire, goes into nationwide theater release later this week. In downtown, Russ McQuaid, CBS 4 News.
And that wraps up the story element, the timeline of events, Jack. But me reflecting just on what I've experienced in the business, a 1-hour live press conference with a man at hostage, I don't know if that would happen today. I don't think most stations would allow that man to have that platform. It seems unheard of to me. What was the reaction in the media at that time when the demand was made and then when stations acquiesced?
Well, the news director of Wish TV, Channel 8, that I retired from then, he chose to stay live there for the entire hour. Wow. The other two stations, let's see, I think it was Channel 13 popped in and out saying, we can't go on showing this on live on TV for what might happen, mm-hmm. Channel 6, they just cut off at some point and said, we're not going to show this at all. And they never went back to it.
Okay.
So taking a safe road. So the reaction was people reporting at Lee Giles, the news director at Channel 8, saying, how could you do that? And that prompted some within the media on a state and I think a national platform.
I don't know how it couldn't go national.
The discussion.
Yeah.
So it set some precedent. And I think Lee, still to this day in his retirement, believes he did the right thing. Fortunately, nobody got shot live on TV.
Yeah. And not here to judge it, more just reacting to the amazement that it happened. And I know, Jack, you weren't there for the entirety of the press conference. You got there at the tail end. When this finally resolved, when they left that room and they undid the wire and the shotgun, and we heard from Mike here, we're seeing him on screen right now too, that Tony was almost jovial at one point, that he had thought he'd gotten away with all of this. What was it like now being on the media side to see this come to a conclusion?
A lot of relief. We had put a lot of hours into it. It's 63 hours. Okay, we weren't counting every hour, but most of us were out there 14 to 18 hours with very little sleep because you didn't want to miss the conclusion at some point. We didn't think it would go 63 hours. We figured within a day and a half, once people cooled down, and the prosecutor kept saying, the voice of the prosecutor kept saying, we have offered him immunity from prosecution if he would just give him up. Of course, this was going through Tony, through Fred Heckman, the news director.
Yes.
Yeah. Tony would only talk to Fred. He wouldn't talk to the negotiators. So it took 63 hours to conclude it, and fortunately, everybody came out alive.
And here we are, 50-ish years later, still talking about it. Has anything changed for you? Just as a witness to such an event, do you feel like that had an impact on your life that you're still feeling today?
Well, my film was Exhibit A in the trial. I had to testify to that, number one. I was very lucky that technically everything came out okay with the film because our processor sometimes will mess up the film. It's been a story of my life, I would say. That every time there's been, the end of the trial, when Tony was brought back in to the court to get him released from the mental institutions, everybody finally came together after about 10 years and said, he's been in there longer than he would have been if he'd been incarcerated for a different felony or something. If judging that Tony did not shoot Dick Hall. And so it would have been a much longer stay. And they said, we got to get him out of the mental institutions. He's causing problems everywhere he goes. So and then every time there was a new update, and one of the keys at this point is I finally met when Russ McQuaid pulled Dick Hall in and got the only exclusive interview with him. He held a news conference, but he wouldn't do individual interviews. And his station at that time didn't send a reporter. And Russ was on vacation. So when he got back, he says, I got to catch this thing up.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But the young people, it'd been a number of years. And the assignment desk goes, oh, well, we didn't know anything about that. But anyway, so when they brought him in, Russ called me and was going to come down to my house and interview me. And I gave him a copy of the video.
Yep.
And
it continues on. Here we are having one more conversation.
Here we
about
are.
it.
Yeah, I finally got to meet Dick Hall. So I was there when he was interviewed in the studio. And for me, that was like, okay, the end of the story.
Yeah.
Well, it sort of was, but then Dick Hall finally dies. Tony Kiritsis finally dies. Each one of these little milestones in time brings us right back to here.
Well, I appreciate you revisiting it one more time with me. You've heard this, I can't count how many times, I'm sure. Amazing footage. Jack, thank you so much for taking the time to reflect on this, to share this with another audience, and we really appreciate it here on We Witnessed.
All right, thanks for the call.
Of course, and for everyone that was watching, we thank you for watching as well. I'm Chip Rooster. I will see you on the next episode.